Hello everyone, this is Attack the Backlog, the podcast where I, Mark Kuznez, tries to make a dent in their backlog one game at a time. This episode is all about Rage, a first-person shooter where you wake up after spending over a century sleeping in a freezer just so you can do everyone's dirty work for them, nor MacDonald not included. This was written prior to his passing, so insert that emoji here. Rage originally came out on October, I like that month. October 4th, in all seriousness, 2011 for PC, PS3, and Xbox 360, and can be played on new Xbox consoles via backward compatibility, which is what I did. Rage is a game I was very excited about when it came out, but never got around to actually playing. It's one of the games that made me want to start up this series in the first place. When the sequel was announced, I dropped everything, balls included. I was a late bloomer and said, I'm finally going to play Rage in preparation to Rage 2. When Rage 2 did come out, and that didn't happen, I rented Rage 2 anyway, played some, enjoyed it, and returned it with the assumption I would finally play Rage so I could feel okay about playing the sequel. That, of course, didn't happen either. I don't even know if there's any story relation or need to play the first game before playing the second game, but I felt compelled to do so, and I'm nothing if not stubborn. Plus, I just genuinely wanted to play Rage. Fast forward a few years later, and here we are. Me, Mark Kuznez, finally playing and beating Rage, and, well, it's okay. The guns feel good, but the rest of the game is varying degrees of just okay, and that's not okay. Not okay because there's nothing I hate more than talking about a game that's just okay because, well, an okay game is just that and doesn't lend itself to interesting and engaging discourse. Hey Mark, how are you liking Rage? It's okay. Is the shooting good? It's fine. How about the world? Is it cool and full of interesting characters and things to do? Not really. What about the driving? I hear there's racing and vehicular combat in the game as well. How's all that stuff? It exists. Okay, I guess that's all the questions I have for you. Any last things you want to say? Nope. While Rage gets the feel of its guns right, it gets very little else right, which isn't to say the rest of the game is bad, but again, just okay. I play the game on normal difficulty, and every enemy, even the most basic bandit or mutant, is a bullet sponge. Whether aiming for the head or the body, it just takes too many bullets to take down enemies, and that made combat significantly less satisfying. It was as if I was shooting BBs instead of bullets. I was especially annoyed by how often a headshot did not lead to an instant death. Opinions will differ, but as far as I'm concerned, a headshot is a headshot no matter what gun you're using, and unless the person you're shooting at is wearing some kind of protective gear, they should die with one shot. It's a head, not a Tootsie Pop. It wasn't until the end, when I stocked up on explosive shotgun rounds, that the combat went from fine to buckets and buckets of fun as I spilled buckets and buckets of blood. It was overkill and I was way overpowered at that point, but I didn't care about how easy the game became because blowing up enemy after enemy into a bloody mess never got old, and I wish I played the entire game with those explosive rounds. I also stuck with the same weapons most of the time because it's a bit cumbersome switching between weapons and the respective ammo types. You can hold 4 weapons at a time and switch between them by holding the right bumper and pushing the right analog stick in one of the 4 cardinal directions. Pushing the left analog stick changes the ammo type. The problem is, time doesn't pause or slow down when you do this, making it stressful trying to change your loadout during firefights. You can quick change between weapons by tapping the right bumper, but this toggles between all 4 of your equipped guns as opposed to switching between the last 2 you use. For example, I would have loved to have been able to quickly switch between my shotgun and assault rifle, but depending on how my loadout was set up, I might have to tap past my pistol and crossbow before getting to the gun I desired. It's by no means a deal breaker, but something that could have been made better with a slight adjustment, which is true for a lot of Rage. One of the biggest faults of Rage is the lack of a map in most spaces. You do get a mini-map when in one of the 2 kind of but not really open areas, but nothing when you're inside a town and no way to see a full-size map of any space. This omission is baffling and made navigating certain spaces incredibly frustrating. When you're told to go somewhere inside of a town and have no idea where said destination is, it can get annoying real fast. fast. You do get guidance on the minimap when outside, but since there's no minimap in towns, you're just shit out of luck. It's not a huge problem, though I did get lost for an extended period of time trying to find one of the resistance bases inside one of these small little hub worlds, but it is a weird mission that I was surprised to see missing. Speaking of weird and baffling, the crafting in Rage is beyond tedious, and beyond tedious for one very specific reason. Crafting works like it does in many other games. You get recipes, whether from completing missions, buying them at a store, or so on, and you craft items by going into the menu and clicking the item you want to craft. Pretty simple, right? The baffling part is, there's an option to craft multiple of an item all at once, but all this does is make it so you don't have to press the A button every single time. You still have to sit there and watch those items get crafted one after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, and so on. What looks like a time saver is nothing more than a button pressing saver. Imagine wanting to craft 20, 30, 40 of an item, and you may want to do that. You're going to have to sit there and watch those 40 items get crafted one after another, and it's ridiculous. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. That's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but it's still pretty fucking stupid. While the bullet sponging enemies and lack of a map is annoying and the way crafting is implemented is tedious, what ultimately kills Rage is its fundamental design. Almost every mission can be broken down into a singular setup. There are enemies here, we need you to kill said enemies. Can you please kill said enemies? Rinse and repeat. You usually have to get an item or turn something on while doing this, but ultimately you're just going around and doing the same thing with slight changes here and there. There are a few racing missions as well, a handful of which are obligatory, but for the most part, you're just shooting things in the face. Now, I'm fine with a game being relatively simple in its design. Take Doom 2016 for instance. In Doom, you're just shooting the shit out of demons from minute 1 to minute 666, but the level design, enemy variety, and the abilities you have all come together to make an otherwise basic structure superb. Rage doesn't do any of that. The levels are almost always boring, and while some melee-based enemies will jump around like they're putting together a parkour reel, most enemies just hide behind cover and peek out every now and again to shoot at you. There are tanky enemies as well, but they just slowly walk in your direction and barely pose a threat. When this is all you're doing throughout the entire game, it starts to wear you down. The arguably most important part is there, great gunplay, but what good is great gunplay if what you're shooting and the scenarios you find yourself in aren't interesting or exciting? Then there's the driving. From driving around the kind of but not really open areas where you can engage in vehicular combat to the races you sometimes have to do, the good thing is driving feels better than expected. The bad thing is everything else. Racing is boring and the vehicular combat is a waste of time. You do get money for killing enemy cars if you activate certain missions, but you can get money in faster and easier ways if that's what your goal is. Everything vehicle related seems like it's there not because it makes the game better, but because it gives the game more variety. More is not always better, and Rage is a perfect example of that. I'm not saying that racing and vehicular combat are bad, they just aren't anything special, and that's ultimately what Rage is, nothing special. All that said, while Rage may not be an amazing game, it is still a good game and worth checking out if you ever have the desire to play it. Just make sure you go in with the right expectations, and I think you'll have a pretty good time. And at least it's not too rage-inducing, which would have been an even bigger problem. So good on Rage for not making me rage while I played it, unlike another game that had aliens in it and Rage in the title. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, that will do it for this here episode of Attack the Backlog. Once again, I am Mark Krishnez. Y'all can find me on Twitter and pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. If you'd like to see me streaming games like Rage, you can do so over at twitch.tv/PX Sausage. If you'd like to check out the videos I make, like the one for this here episode of Attack the Backlog, you can do that over at youtube.com/Pixelated Sausage. Speaking of Pixelated Sausage, you put a little dot, you put a little comma after the dot, and what do you get? You get pixelatedsausage.com. And you know what that is? That's my site, pixelatedsausage.com, that I just said. And I'm saying it again because it is, in fact, pixelatedsausage.com, where you can find this podcast and the Pixelated Sausage podcast, both of which are available on podcast services across the globe. You can also check out the art I make on the site, and if you see something you like, you can purchase a print of the piece you fancy. And if you fancy the site in general and anything that we do, please go over to patreon.com/PXS and support us that way. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this here episode, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.